Hey, my name is Wesley Hart. I'm 33 years old, and I drive a tow truck for a living in a small mountain town in Colorado where the winters come early and stay too long. It's honest work. Cold hands, late nights, a phone that rings at 2 in the morning when somebody slides off Route 9 inches the ice. I've got a small house at the edge of town, a dog named Boone who's mostly deaf now, and a kitchen table with 2 chairs where only one ever gets used. My wife, Ruth, passed 4 years ago. Cancer. The fast kind. The kind that doesn't give you time to get used to the idea. After she was gone, I kept the second chair at the table because taking it away felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit. So it just sat there. Empty. 4 years. People in town stopped asking me to things after a while. Not out of cruelty, they just learned that the answer was always no. I'd become the quiet guy with the tow truck, the one who showed up when your car died and disappeared before you could offer him coffee. I'd made peace with it. Or I told myself I had, which isn't the same thing, but it's close enough to get a man through the years. That night, the snow was coming down hard, and I'd just finished hauling a minivan out of a ditch near the diner on Main Street. I was standing in the lot, hands jammed in my coat, scraping ice off my windshield, when she came out of the diner, too fast for the ice, and nearly went down on the curb. I caught her arm before she fell. She looked up at me, and I want to tell you I noticed how pretty she was. But the truth is, the first thing I noticed was how scared she looked. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I thank you. Sorry. You okay?" She glanced back at the diner window. Through the glass, I could see a long table, people in nice clothes, a holiday dinner of some kind, and she was looking at it the way you look at a room you don't want to walk back into. "I'm fine," she said, in the voice people use when they're not. I should have let it go. A man minds his own business. But I just watched her almost crack her head on the ice, and something about the way she kept looking at that window held me there. "You sure?" She let out a breath that fogged in the cold, and then to a complete stranger. In a parking lot. In the snow, she said the strangest thing anyone had ever said to me. "This is going to sound insane," she said, talking fast now, like she had to get it out before she lost her nerve. "But my whole family is in there. My mother, my aunts, my ex, everyone. And for 2 years I've been telling them I'm married. I made him up. A husband. Because it was easier than the truth. Easier than the questions. And tonight they all showed up to finally meet him. And he doesn't exist. And I am about to walk back in there and be humiliated in front of every person who ever doubted me." She looked up at me, snow catching in her hair, eyes bright and desperate. "Please," she said. "I'll pay you. I'll pay you whatever you want. Just come inside with me. Just for one night. Just pretend to be my husband. One dinner. 1 hour. And then you'll never see me again. I swear it." I stood there in the falling snow with this woman I'd known for 90 seconds, holding her arm so she wouldn't slip, and I thought about the second chair at my kitchen table that hadn't been sat in for 4 years. And I heard myself say the thing I didn't plan to say, the thing that surprised me more than it surprised her. "No," I said. Her face fell. She started to pull away, already apologizing, already bracing for the humiliation. "No," I said again. And I held on, gentle, until she looked back at me. "I'll come inside. I'll sit at that table. I'll do this for you." I didn't let go of her arm. "But I'm not going to pretend," I said. "I'm too old and too tired to pretend at anything anymore. So if I walk in there with you, I walk in as a man who actually means it. That's the only way I know how to do it." The snow kept falling. She stared at me like she couldn't decide whether I was the answer to her prayer or a stranger she just made the worst mistake of her life, trusting. And neither of us moved. There in the cold, on the edge of something neither of us saw coming. "I don't understand," she finally said. "I don't either, fully. I admitted. But here's what I know. I'm not going to walk in there and put on a show. I'm not going to fake a marriage in front of your family and then drive home and leave you to clean up the lie later. If I sit at that table and call myself your husband, then for tonight, that's who I am. No acting. I'll mean every word I say. And tomorrow we'll figure out the rest, like two grown people. That's my offer. Take it or leave it. She was quiet for a long moment. The snow gathered on her shoulders. You're either the kindest man I've ever met, she said slowly, or completely out of your mind. My late wife used to say it was both. Something flickered across her face when I said late wife. The desperation in her eyes shifted into something gentler, something I couldn't name yet. What's your name? She asked. Wesley. Wesley Hart, Adeline Cross. She let out a shaky breath. Okay, Wesley Hart. I don't know why I'm trusting you. But, okay, I should tell you a little about who I was walking into that diner, because it matters. After Ruth died, I didn't fall apart the way people expect. I made my life smaller and smaller, until it could fit inside the cab of a tow truck and a house with one used chair. I figured if I never wanted anything again, I could never lose anything again. That was the whole philosophy. Keep the circle tight. Keep the heart shut. Show up when somebody's car breaks down. Fix it. Leave before they can offer you a place at their table. Ruth would have hated what I'd become. She was the warmest person I ever knew, the kind who'd invite a stranger in from the cold without a second thought, who left the porch light on for people who didn't even live with us, just in case somebody needed it. When she got sick, the thing she made me promise wasn't to remember her. She knew I'd never forget. The thing she made me promise was that I wouldn't shut the door on the world after she was gone. I broke that promise the day after her funeral and kept breaking it for 4 years. So when Adeline Cross stood in a snowy parking lot and begged a stranger to walk into the hardest room of her life with her some part of me, the part Ruth had loved, woke up for the first time in 4 years and said yes before the rest of me could talk it out of it. We walked toward the diner door together. At the last second, she stopped, her hand on the cold glass. There are some things you should know before we go in, she said quickly. And my ex, his name is Brant. He's going to be the worst of it, because he never thought I'd move on, and he spent 2 years waiting for proof that I made up a husband to save face. She bit her lip. Which I did. So, don't let him trip you up. Adeline. What? Breathe. I've got it. You don't even know our story. We've been married 2 years. How did we meet? Where do we live? What do you do? I'm your husband, I said simply. I drive a tow truck. That's all true except the part where I'm your husband. And I already told you for tonight, even that's true. Stop trying to script it. Real things don't have a script. She looked at me for one more second. Then she pushed open the door, and the warmth and noise of the diner rolled out into the cold, and we walked in together. The long table went quiet the second they saw us. There were maybe a dozen people. An older woman at the head, who could only be Adeline's mother. Same eyes, harder mouth. A round, sharp-faced woman beside her, who I figured was Aunt Coral. A scatter of cousins and aunts. And down at the end, leaning back in his chair with a glass of wine and an expression I disliked immediately, a man in an expensive sweater who didn't stand up when we came in. Brant, Adeline, her mother said, in a voice like a closing door. We were starting to wonder if you'd left. Sorry, Mom, the snow. Adeline's hand found mine under the edge of the table the moment we sat down, and she gripped it so hard I felt her pulse. Everyone. This is Wesley, my husband. The silence that followed had texture to it. I could feel a dozen pairs of eyes deciding whether to believe me. Husband, Aunt Coral repeated, like she was tasting something off. The famous husband. 2 years, and we finally get to meet him. We were beginning to think you didn't exist, Wesley. I'd been in enough cold situations to know you don't warm them up by flinching. I reached across the table and shook her hand, firm and easy. Can't blame you, I said. Adeline keeps me hidden away. I work nights mostly. I run a towing operation. So the holidays I'm usually pulling folks out of ditches. This is the first family dinner I've managed to make in a while. I'm sorry it took so long. That's on my schedule, not on her. I watched it land. The specificity of it, the nights, the towing, the ditches, was harder to poke at than a rehearsed lie, because none of it was rehearsed. It was just true. Adeline's mother studied me. And how exactly did the two of you meet? Her car died en route 9 inches, a snowstorm, I said. Middle of the night, battery and a cracked belt. She was standing out in the cold, same as tonight, and I pulled over. I glanced at Adeline. She tried to pay me for the tow, and I wouldn't take it. And she got so stubborn about it that I figured the only way to settle it was to take her to dinner instead. Been trying to settle that argument ever since. A couple of the cousins smiled. Adeline let out a small breath beside me. The grip on my hand loosened, just slightly. But Brant set his wineglass down with a click. Funny, he said, because Adeline always told us you two met at a charity gala. In the city, the table's attention swung to me like a spotlight. Adeline went rigid. I didn't miss a beat. That's where I proposed, I said. Different night. She tells the proposal story so much she forgets. People don't always know the boring part, the part where her car broke down and a tow truck driver wouldn't leave her alone. I find a lot of people only remember the gala, the fancy part. They skip over the cold night on the side of the road that came first. But that's the part that actually mattered. I wasn't only talking about Adeline anymore, and Brant knew it. Something in his face tightened. He'd been the gala. He'd been the fancy part, and he'd skipped over her when it got cold. Adeline turned and looked at me. And for a second, she forgot to perform. She just looked at me, like she was seeing something she hadn't expected to find. Dinner went on. I'm not going to pretend it got easy, but it got survivable. Aunt Coral kept probing and I kept answering. And the thing that saved me was that I'd decided not to lie about anything except the marriage itself. When they asked what I did, I told them the truth. When they asked about Ruth, and the mother did ask. Sharp as a tack. Have you been married before, Wesley? I told the truth about that too. I said. She passed 4 years ago. Cancer. The table went quiet in a different way then. The hostile kind of quiet became the human kind. I'm sorry, Adeline's mother said, and for the first time she sounded like she meant something. Thank you. She was a good woman. She taught me most of what I know about how to treat people. I looked at Adeline. I got lucky twice. Not everybody does. Under the table, Adeline's hand found mine again. After dinner, the family thinned out. Cousins left. Aunts gathered coats. Adeline's mother pulled her aside near the door, and I stood by the front window watching the snow and trying to figure out what exactly I'd just done with my evening and possibly my life. That's when Brant came over. Nice performance, he said quietly, so only I could hear. Wasn't a performance. Sure. He smiled. The kind of smile that's all teeth. Let me tell you something, tow truck. I dated Adeline for 3 years. I know her. I know she's been alone since I left. I know she made up a husband because she couldn't stand the thought of me being right about her, and I know a hired hand when I see one. So, how much is she paying you? Because whatever it is, I'll double it for you to disappear and let her finally admit the truth. I looked at him for a long moment. You really don't know her at all, I said. 3 years, and you never figured out the one thing that matters about her. And what's that? That she'd rather stand alone in the cold making up a husband than spend one more night next to a man who made her feel small. I picked my coat up off the chair. You want to know how much she's paying me, Brant? Nothing, I offered. And I'm not disappearing. Good night. I left him standing there. Outside, the snow had eased, to a soft fall. Adeline came out a few minutes later and found me leaning against my tow truck. "You didn't have to wait," she said. "You shouldn't drive in this. Your car still working after the last time?" "Barely." She almost laughed. Then, her face crumpled, just slightly. "Wesley, I don't even know how to thank you. What you did in there. The thing about the cold night that came first." She stopped. "Nobody's ever defended me like that. Not once in my whole life. It wasn't hard. It was all true." "It wasn't, though. We're not married. You're a stranger." I looked at her in the orange glow of the diner sign, snow falling around us, and I told her the truth, because I was too old and too tired to do anything else. 4 years ago, my wife made me promise I wouldn't shut the door on the world after she was gone, I said. And I broke that promise the next day. I've spent 4 years being the guy who shows up when your car breaks and leaves before you can offer him coffee. Tonight's the first time since she died that I've sat at a table with people and felt like a person instead of a ghost. I shook my head. "So, don't thank me, Adeline. You think I did you a favor walking into that diner, but you're the one who pulled me out of a ditch I've been stuck in for 4 years. We're even." She stared at me, and then, standing in the snow, she started to cry, not the scared crying from earlier, but something with relief in it. She started. "This is going to sound crazy, but can I make you dinner sometime? A real one, not as payment. Just because I'd like to see you again when neither of us is performing for a room full of people who hate us?" I thought about the second chair at my kitchen table. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that. I'd love to tell you it was simple after that." It wasn't. Adeline came to my house that next week. I'd cleaned it for the first time in months, and when she walked in, the first thing she noticed was the kitchen table. "2 chairs?" she said. "But you live alone." I told her about Ruth then. The whole thing. The promise I broke, the chair I couldn't take away, the 4 years of making my life small enough to fit in a truck cab. She listened the way Ruth used to listen, without trying to fix it, just letting it be what it was. And then she told me her own story, the parts she hadn't said in the diner. She'd been with Brant for 3 years. He came from money, the gala world, the right clothes, the right last name, and the whole time, in 1,000 tiny ways, he'd made her feel like she was lucky he'd chosen her, like she was a project he'd taken on. When she finally left him, her own mother had taken his side. "Adeline! Men like Brant don't come along twice. What are you thinking? You're not getting any younger." The made-up husband started as a small lie to get her mother off her back at one dinner, and then it grew, the way lies do, until she'd painted herself into a corner where the only way out was a man who didn't exist. And then a man who did exist pulled over on Route 9, I said, except that part was made up too. "It was the gala," she admitted, embarrassed. "I made up the whole thing. There was no broken-down car. I just thought it sounded more romantic than I invented a husband out of thin air," I laughed. "Well, there's a real broken-down car now. Yours, last week, on Route 9. So the story's true going forward, if you want it to be." She looked at me carefully. "Wesley, what are we doing?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I'm not going to pretend, remember? So whatever this is, let's just let it be real and slow, and figure it out as it comes. I'm in no hurry. I've got nothing but time and an empty chair." She came back the next week, and the week after. We didn't rush it. We took walks in the snow, with deaf old Boone trailing behind us. She helped me with the books for the towing business because she was sharp with numbers and I was not. I fixed the heater in her terrible car for free, and she got stubborn about paying me. And I told her she could settle the debt by having dinner with me, and we both laughed because that was the made-up story becoming true in real time. Slowly, the second chair at my table stopped being a monument to something I'd lost. and started being a place where someone sat. Then Brant came back. He didn't give up. Men like him rarely do, not because they want the thing, but because they can't stand to lose it. He started showing up. At the diner, when Adeline was there, outside her apartment, he told her mother that I was a con artist, that he'd looked into me, that a widowed tow truck driver circling a vulnerable woman was a story that ended one way, and Adeline's mother, who'd never wanted her to leave Brant in the first place, listened. The pressure came the way it always does, through the people you love. Adeline's mother called her, worried, manipulated, half believing Brant's poison. He says Wesley's after something. He says you barely know this man. Adeline, think about what you're doing. And one cold night, Adeline showed up at my door, and I could tell before she said a word that she was about to do the thing wounded people do. Maybe we should slow down, she said, not meeting my eyes. Maybe this is too fast. Maybe my mother's right. Maybe I don't really know you. Maybe, Adeline, maybe I'm just doing the same thing I always do, latching onto the first person who's kind to me because I'm scared of being alone, and that's not fair to you. Adeline, stop. I stepped onto the porch into the cold with her. What did Brant say to you? Her face cracked. He says you're after my she stopped. I don't even have money, Wesley. That's the stupid part. I don't have anything for you to be after. So I don't even know what he... She pressed her hands to her face. I'm scared. That's the truth. I'm scared because the last time I let myself want something this much, it turned out to be a man who spent 3 years making me feel like nothing. And you've been kind. And kind is exactly what Brant was at the beginning too. And I don't trust myself to tell the difference anymore. I stood there in the cold and I understood her better than she knew, because I'd been doing my own version of the same thing for 4 years, pulling away from the world before it could hurt me again. I'm going to tell you something, I said, and then you can decide. The night you asked me to pretend to be your husband, I said no. You remember why? She nodded, wiping her eyes. Because I'm too old and too tired to want anything I don't mean. I've got one heart left in me, Adeline, and it's been in a box for 4 years, and I am not going to take it out and hand it to you as a maybe. So let me be clear. So there's no branch-shaped doubt in it. I took a breath. I'm not kind to you because I want something from you. I'm kind to you because somewhere in that snowy parking lot you reminded a dead man that he was still alive. I don't want your money, you just told me. You don't have any, and I didn't have any to begin with. I don't want to make you small. I spent 4 years being small myself. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, least of all you. What I want, the only thing I want, is to stop eating dinner across from an empty chair. That's it. That's the whole con. She was crying openly now. But here's the part that matters, I went on. If you need to walk away because you're scared, then walk. I won't chase you, and I won't guilt you. I broke a promise to a dying woman out of fear, so God knows I understand fear. But don't walk away because Brant told you to. Don't let the man who made you feel like nothing get the last word on whether you deserve something. That'd be the real tragedy. Not me. Him winning again from across town without even being in the room. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she stepped forward and put her forehead against my chest, the same way she'd gripped my hand under the table that first night. And I wrapped my arms around her on the cold porch, and we stood there while the snow came down. Okay, she said into my coat. Okay. No more pulling away, I agreed. For either of us. Brant made one last play. He always had to have one last play. It was at a New Year's gathering, Adeline's family again. A bigger one this time, half the town in the community hall. Brant had wormed his way in through her mother, and he'd been drinking, and somewhere around 11, he decided he'd waited long enough to be proven right. He stood up in front of everyone, glass in hand, and started in, "Tow truck driver." Drowning in debt, I'd bet. And isn't it interesting how he appeared right when Adeline needed a husband to show up? Almost like somebody hired him. The room went still. Adeline went pale beside me. Her mother looked stricken, caught between her daughter and the poison she'd half swallowed. I stood up. I'm not a man who likes a room's eyes on him. But I'd learned something in that snowy parking lot 2 months back. And the lesson was, you don't get warm by flinching. Brant's right about a few things, I said, and I watched his smile spread, and I let it. I am a widower. I do drive a tow truck. And I was drowning, though not in debt, in something worse. I looked around the room. Most of you don't know me. That's fair. I keep to myself. But some of you have had your car die on a back road at 2 a.m. in a blizzard, and somebody came and pulled you out and wouldn't take your money. That was probably me. I've spent 4 years pulling strangers out of ditches at the worst moments of their nights, and then driving home alone before any of them could offer me so much as a cup of coffee. Because I decided after my wife died that I didn't deserve the coffee, that I'd just do the work and disappear. The hall was silent. Brant wants you to believe Adeline hired me. She didn't. She asked me to pretend to be her husband for one night, to save her from being humiliated by a man I looked right at him, who spent 3 years making her feel like she was lucky he tolerated her. And I told her no. I told her I don't pretend. I told her that if I walked into that room and called myself her husband, I'd mean it, because I'm too old to fake anything. I turned back to the room. So, no, Brant, nobody hired me. A scared woman asked a broken man for 1 hour of help, and instead she gave a broken man his life back. That's the whole story. It's not a scandal. It's just 2 people who got pulled out of the cold. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then old Adeline's mother, who I'd half expected to side with Brant to the end, stood up slowly, and she looked at Brant, and she said, in a voice that carried, "You know, Brant, I let you in my head for 2 months. I told my own daughter she was being foolish. And I sat here just now watching this man say more honest things in 2 minutes than you said in 3 years." She set down her glass. "I think it's time you left." Brant looked around the room for an ally and found none. He set his glass down hard, muttered something, and walked out into the snow. He left town not long after. I heard he moved back to the city, to the gala world, where the fancy part is the only part anyone remembers. Adeline's mother came over to us after. She took my hand in both of hers. "I owe you an apology," she said. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "You were scared for her. I understand being scared." She looked at Adeline, then at me, and something in her face softened all the way through. "Ruth," she said, "your wife. Was she a good cook? You mentioned she taught you how to treat people." "Terrible cook," I said, and Adeline laughed, surprised. "Burned everything. But she left the porch light on for strangers." That was the part that mattered. Adeline's mother nodded slowly. "Then I think she'd be glad," she said, "that you finally walked back through a door. We got married the following autumn. A real wedding this time, no invented husband, no script, no performance. Just a small gathering in the same community hall, with half the town there, including a good number of folks I'd pulled out of ditches over the years who came up to shake my hand and tell me they'd always wondered about the quiet guy with the tow truck. In my vows, I told Adeline the truth, because by then telling her the truth was the easiest thing in the world. "The first night I met you, you asked me to pretend to be your husband," I said. "And I told you I don't pretend. I'm not going to start now. So here's what's real. I spent 4 years making my life small enough to fit in the cab of a truck, because I thought if I never wanted anything again, I could never lose anything again. And then you stood in a snowy parking lot and asked a stranger for help. And you reminded me that a life that can't lose anything is a life that doesn't have anything either. And I am going to spend the rest of my life leaving the porch light on for you. Adeline cried. She'd been crying since I started. In her vows, she said, I made up a husband because I couldn't imagine a real one ever choosing me without making me feel like a burden. You walked into the worst room of my life and you didn't pretend, you didn't perform, you just told the truth and held my hand under the table. I spent so long waiting for the fancy part, the gala part, that I almost missed the part that actually mattered: a cold night, a kind stranger, and a man who meant it. She squeezed my hand. I don't want the gala. I want the cold night that came first. I want the porch light. I want you. We took the second chair from my old kitchen table, the one that sat empty for 4 years, and we kept it, Adeline insisted. She said it wasn't a monument to grief anymore. It was proof that the table had been waiting for someone the whole time. These days, the house at the edge of town isn't quiet anymore. Boone passed last winter, old and deaf and happy, and we buried him under the pine out back, and a few months later, Adeline brought home a pup that barks at the snow. The phone still rings at 2 in the morning sometimes, and I still get up and pull strangers out of ditches on Route 9. But now there's a light on when I get home. Now there's someone in the second chair when I sit down to coffee. Now I'm not a ghost who shows up and disappears. I'm just a man who got lucky twice, which is more than most people get. People ask, sometimes, how we met. Adeline likes to tell them the real version now. No gala, no invented husband, no script. I asked him to pretend to be my husband for one night, she says. And he looked at me in the snow and said, I don't want to pretend. And then she always adds the part that matters. The part I didn't understand that night but understand completely now. It turned out he wasn't talking about that one night at all. He was talking about the rest of his life. He just hadn't met me yet to say it to. I'd spent 4 years believing the safest thing a man could do was want nothing and shut the door. A stranger in a parking lot taught me the truth in a single sentence. The safest thing isn't shutting the door. The safest thing is being the kind of man who tells the truth, leaves the light on, and means every word, even when you're standing in the cold, even when you've got nothing left, even when the only honest thing to say is, I don't want to pretend. Because sometimes that one true sentence is the door, and on the other side of it is the whole rest of your life.